Class brought to you by Vdriven. My name is Wade Yenny. I lead business development as well as brand management for our company, and it's glad to have you here today as we talk about our topic, one that's hot button for many, and that's deduction management. And where I'm going to be the host for today. I'd like to share a link real quick to talk a little bit potentially about anyone interested in conversing with us beyond today's event. This is how you can reach out to myself and schedule some time to chat. But for the purpose of today's call, we're going to Luke Abbott, our CEO, is going to be talking here shortly. But along with this, we encourage you to ask some questions, take notes, and at the end of the call, we're going to leave hopefully at least 10, 15 minutes for space to answer questions as we go through. And I know we had a couple people reach out and email some questions in advance, so we'll get to those as well. But in the meantime, Luke, you ready to do this?
I'm ready to have some fun, Wade.
All right.
So this is such a good subject. I actually just got off the phone with a national newspaper who's actually digging into deductions in our industry. So this is something that yes, us in the industry are thinking about, but soon it's things that the entire country and maybe world will be talking about. So I have a lot of good stuff for you today. Let me share my screen and we can start digging in. Wait, I'm going to confirm you can see my screen okay?
Yep. Looks good.
Fantastic. I noticed in the people coming in to this meeting today that many of you already know. Thank you for a lot of new faces. Welcome. Glad you're here. Uh, I've taken feedback from past presentations, and I'm working this time on being much more clear in what I share, so to make it even more understandable. But that said, there will probably be lots of questions that come up for you, and there will be plenty of space at the end. I'll be mindful of our time and make sure that I'm done presenting by 35, 40 minutes after the hour and leave space. So please, you can submit the questions as Wade said, or you can ask them live as we go. But let's dig in. So the idea here, I like the idea from victim to victor. I have a lot of experience in this space. I used to own a company called Monterey Provision, which my team and I grew into a national distributor that I sold to KeHE in 2016, and then worked at KeHE for a couple of years at the senior level, and then left to go work at Jimbo's naturally with the guy called J Dog, Mr. Jimbo, and had a great time there, and then started Vdriven 6 years and 1 month ago and started out with just me. And today it's grown a lot. I think we have about 50 team members, work with over 65, maybe 70 brands today, and it's been really an amazing and humbling experience. Also have taught supply chain at the University of San Diego. Did that last year and the year before, and also am host of the Reconnected podcast. And if you haven't listened to that, highly recommend it. We talk to investors, retailers, brands, uh, just anyone in the industry that trying to really help disambiguate, help you understand more about our industry and the people who drive it. So that's me. Vdriven, just to share for a minute who we serve. We are very intently focused in emerging and mid-sized CPG brands. That is the core of everything we do, from pre-revenue up to generally 15, $20 million is kind of our sweet spot. And we do provide a lot of services for people there, including deduction management, accounting, and sales and brand management. We also have a division dedicated to working with investors. They like us because we are connected to retailers, and then we have an amazing team who are just fantastic at doing due diligence on investment opportunities, and then even coming in and helping to run those companies after they invest. We also are very focused on retailers. I think this is unique in the industry in that we are constantly thinking about how we can be more than just bringing a product and trying to sell it. You may have seen that we do pitch slams for chains like Sprouts and Fresh Time and Lunds and Byerly, and that's expanding all the time and really trying to create more value to help the natural retailer be more successful. We also partner with a number of distributors, none of them national, but more regional distributors to help them succeed and to be of service to brands like you. So consulting, sales brand management, deduction management, CPG accounting, and outsourced manpower is a newer area we have. We actually have a Philippine entity, and we have dozens of team members helping to serve retailers, it's not retailers, but actually distributors and brands all across the country. So let's dig into today. So we're going to talk a little for very briefly about the current state of national distribution, We'll talk about some common types of deductions. We'll talk about erroneous deductions. I thought in a discussion about deductions, OIs or off invoices is kind of like you're, instead of waiting to be deducted, you're giving an allowance to a distributor to be passed on to a retailer. And I think it's a really important area. So we're going to spend some time on that as well. And then again, create space for question and answers. So let's dig in. Current state of of national distribution. The bottom line is that whatever's happened, and whoever's fault it is, I do not know. But retailers do demand lower and lower markups and play distributors against each other. And that has driven increased pressure for distributors to shift costs to manufacturers in order to be profitable. And the next slide, I'll be a bit more in your face about explaining it, but and like the why. But distributors continually expand deductions to cover their operational costs, and there's no way that a national distributor could exist as a going concern today based on the current market if there was no way to cost shift to brands. That's just the way it is. And so I used to be really upset about it, especially when I owned my own distribution company and I was competing with companies like KeHE and Unify, and I was struggling to have markups that were as low as they were because I didn't cost shift enough. It's just the market, and distributors that don't cost shift just eventually may cease to exist is the challenge. But the rub here is that the complexity of deduction management leads to unbudgeted, avoidable, and erroneous deductions, and we'll dig into some of those today. My goal here is to empower you to really minimize your financial contribution to the distributor charities. I put that in quotes, right? It's like they're not making money, they need your help. Please give them money, but don't not too much. And we'll talk about how to manage that. This one is a new slide that we created in the last couple of weeks, and I thought this could help you understand what's going on better. So we're modeling the idea of a $1 of distributor landed cost. So think of it as a bar, and that bar delivered to Unify, KeHE, or another distributor is a buck. And then there's the markup. So the markup to some of the larger retailers in America is just 8 cents on that dollar, right? 8%. So that from that dollar sale, they would make 8 cents. The problem is this negative side here of 11 cents, which is the cost to operate the distributor. So they're charging 8, but it costs them 11. So they're -3 at this point. That's not sustainable. So they have to cost shift back to you, the manufacturer or the brand, in order to be profitable, giving them 4.5 cents. Some, Unify is doing better in the last quarter, but they were actually more in the 2 cent area for every dollar that they were selling. So this is the problem. This cost shifting is what that they're trying to do to you. And our goal is to make sure that, again, you're not contributing too much to the charity. So let's go on. So common types of deductions. So if I think about it, and this is not exhaustive, but just representative, there's unavoidable deductions. That's you signed a contract with the national distributor. So there's a number of things that you signed for when you signed up for when you signed that contract. So they're contract driven. They're not avoidable. Once you sign that contract, in general, they're happening. And then you also have, as you think about deductions coming back through distributors, you've made commitments to retailers to do promotions, refills, and other things, and those are unavoidable, right? At that point, that's going to come back through the distributor in most cases and come back to you. And preventable would be optional distributor services. Distributors love to sell you extra stuff to bring in revenue. Many of those things don't create a lot of value for you. So they're preventable. You don't have to do them in general. The ship not receive deduction is one that we've gotten very good at coaching brands on how to avoid most of the time. We'll get into that during the presentation today. Packaging UPC changes, this came up on a board call for one of my clients, and we dug into the fact that it was over $100,000 for us to execute a packaging change at a distributor, and also didn't even include lost sales that happen as part of that process. Short ships is when you do not ship everything that the distributor orders from you, and that can result in a fee, but that one's avoidable, and I'll talk to you about that today. Price protection. If you lower your pricing on future POs compared to older POs that have been received and there's inventory still in stock, they're going to deduct to kind of, they call it mark to market, to bring the existing inventory in line with the current pricing of product coming in. And then spoils. And that one also can be avoidable. And I will explain more about that as we go. And then there's also this third category of erroneous, and this is any deduction that doesn't fall under avoidable or preventable, and and it's basically a deduction that happened that should not have happened. And we find that we actually challenge about 17% of deductions that are coming in terms of quantity of deductions, and usually recovering about 8% of all deductions turn out to be, you can get that money actually back from the distributor. So that's at a high level what we're doing. I'll just get into more detail. So these are on the right-hand side of what I'm going to dig into today. I won't read them off to you individually. I'm just going to dig right into them right now to be mindful of time. So that first off, I want to dig into this idea of, can contracts be negotiated or renegotiated? So contracts generally cannot be renegotiated with larger distributors. The exception is if you sell your business into a new entity, that may be able to renegotiate. That certainly is possible. We used to, like 2018, 2019, when I started my company, we were often able to get concessions from larger distributors. We've noticed since COVID that those distributors are less likely to negotiate. And really the only opportunity that I see for a new brand that's currently not doing business with a large distributor, but needs to because they're being set up, is when there's a large distributor requesting your product through that distributor. So if Sprout says to KeHE, hey, I want this product, in general, KeHE needs to bring that product in. More and more compared to before COVID, the distributors and have been able to align with their retailers on the fact that they do not make money selling product, and that they need to have these contracts, they need to have these deductions, these fees in order to be profitable. So what we found is I've had this happen actually 3 years ago, where we had a brand authorized by the Fresh Market and by Mothers, and we fought back on the contract and tried to negotiate it, and we effectively were shut down and it took us months to recover from that and get back in again. So I'd say in general, negotiation has become extremely difficult, not impossible, but difficult and fraught with risk, especially at the setup process. If a retailer says, hey, my review period is, April, you're starting the process in January, if you start negotiating, that could drag things on, you can miss your review. So there's a lot of risk in that. So going on. So understanding the 2% terms, something to understand here is, number one, do not expect to receive your check in 10 days, even if you have 2%, 10 net 35 terms with your distributor, especially if they're picking up from you. So the way that the contracts are written is that if they're picking up FOB your dock, they don't have to pay for it until it gets delivered. So in this case, we have a product that's going from the manufacturer in blue to a consolidation warehouse, usually like in Riverside County, California, that then has to go out to the Indiana distribution center. So this would be like a KeHE example going through Chino. It isn't when the product's picked up that the clock starts. It isn't even when it gets to the cross stock that the clock starts. It starts once it gets all the way across the country and is actually put away into a slot or into a overstock slot. That's when that clock starts. So what we generally see is that that most of the time with these 2% 10 net situations is that you'll be paid between 25 and 35 days. And so in general, fighting back against a 2% deduction paid in 35 days or 30 days, it's probably not going to be winnable in most situations. At 45 days, for sure, like at that time frame, the vast majority of product should have already been delivered by day 30, 35, and you should have been paid. So in that situation, I think fighting back makes a lot of sense. So let's go on. MCBs and free fills. Digging into the free fill idea, this is often something that catches younger brands off guard. I think I'll probably just show it on the next slide is a better way to do it here. So this idea of you charge Unify, for example, 240 FOB your dock. So they come in, they pull in, they pick up your product, they bring it to Unify distribution center, and they add it in freight of 20 cents. So that 240 becomes 260. Then they deliver that free fill, like a case of this retail product, into Whole Foods, and they do it at an 8% markup. So they're probably charging Whole Foods about 281 for that retail unit, and then they're getting a free fill. They're giving them that case of that product for free. where brands get confused is that you are billed back on the highest list price that very few retailers actually pay. So instead of being billed back at your 240 or your 260 or the 281, in this example where there's a 45% markup between the landed cost and what you're billed back at, it'd be a 377 deduction. So I've been asked, is there a way around this? And I have not been successful with it, but one idea would be to ask the retailer, hey, instead of doing this is a free fill, could we just figure out a fixed dollar amount of that free fill value? And then could we just have it as maybe just a one-time deduction back to me? If it goes back through Unify or KeHE, you'll still pay a fee for the processing, but you could save a lot of money. I mean, most free fills, like for Sprouts or Whole Foods, are going to be $50,000 or more today. So if you could save 10% of that, that could be really a big deal, right, for your company. Okay. So Unify SSA, I wanted just to spend a moment on this. SSA came out this year. It was something that sounds on the surface exciting. It's the idea that they're going to have a 2.5% flat fee. Basically, they're going to deduct off every single invoice that percentage, and it gives you access to data that many emerging brands didn't know about or didn't pay for, didn't have access to in the past. And it also eliminated a number of like setup fees and other fees that were especially burdensome to emerging brands. I did hear, and I'll have to have this confirmed, that the only problem with this is that Unify SSA, I believe at this point, is only available once you've been with Unify for 6 months. So that the biggest advantage would be, hey, I got authorized at Unify. I need to set up, or I got authorized at Whole Foods. I need to get set up at Unify, and I can sign up for SSA and avoid all the setup fees. But that doesn't seem to be possible right now. You have to wait 6 months before you can start avoiding those fees by paying the 2.5% flat fee. So one more thing on this is, it isn't like you as a brand asked for this, right? You didn't say, you're being forced into it. This is a mandatory 2.5% flat fee. And I do think it's really important for an emerging brand to have access to data around what's happening in the distribution centers relative to their products. So, it's just being responsible so that you can manage your supply chain better. So I think that's a value that you're getting. And ideally, if you're especially a younger brand, avoiding all the setup fees and other fees, some other fees as well, I think overall SSA is a step in the right direction. The only problem is if you're really, really challenged on capital and you didn't really want to pay for that data, and now you're forced to. So just wanted to bring that up. With KeHE, for example, they have a 2% fee that also is mandatory, that also gives you access to data. But that fee doesn't exclude you from a lot of the fees that the Unify SSA one does. So in some ways, the Unify one is more advantageous than the KeHE approach for an emerging brand. Audits. So this is something that a lot of people don't think about, and audits can come back to haunt you from activities that happened years in the past. So, and I had my distribution company too. There were these audit firms that would reach out and say, "Hey, you're leaving money on the table. Let us go back and look at all of your records and find out where you failed to get paid for something." And that's what large distributors do. And you can get hit for something that happened a year or two ago. And in my mind, it's why it's so important that you fully understand like all the possible deductions and that you are aware of what you're committing to, that you are accruing in your financials. So even if you don't get the deduction for 2 years, you already accrued for it at least. But just want to make sure you're aware this could come haunt you in the future. Ship not received. This is one that we've gotten under control for most of our clients. Um, in the normal world, when someone comes and picks up product from your dock, like a distributor, there's a BOL or bill of lading that's signed, and that's where risk of loss transfers at that point. Because of the contracts from the larger distributors, that isn't the way it works. So risk of loss in some way does pass, but if they get it to a distribution center and they can't find a pallet, they have the ability to bill you back for that pallet that they can't find or not pay you for it. And that's a challenge. So what we do, you can see this example here, the dock worker taking a picture, is we highly recommend that brands take pictures on all sides of the pallet, get a picture of the distributor driver with the product on the truck, right? Just everything we can to have evidence that yes, no, we did ship everything. And that usually is enough for us to win those deductions. So you can fight back if you can prove to the distributor that they really did pick up that product. The other way to prevent it is to go delivered, as opposed to having them pick up. And in those cases, generally there is no shipped or not received deduction that can happen. And for a younger brand that's not in any major accounts, generally having the distributor pick up is like one of the most cost advantageous ways to go. As you get larger, as you get into like Sprouts and Whole Foods and Fresh Time and Fresh Market, in general, you're better off going delivered. And you can shop among many different carriers to find the best cost, but it's so much better when you can control your own supply chain. You're not dependent on your large distributor getting things to their cross dock. And oftentimes you can get it to their DCs a lot faster than they can. So I think that's something I highly recommend. Okay, price protection. So if you lower your price, the national distributor will deduct for the difference between the price you charge and the new price. So this doesn't happen when you increase your price. It only happens when you lower your price. And another way to describe that in accounting terms is mark to market. And so this has burned a lot of clients that I have, and the general advice is this. And this is where SSA comes in, right, as well with Unify, is I can now see what's in those distribution centers. I can work with my buyers at these large distributors to minimize the amount of product coming in so that there's a smaller deduction on the other end. So the other thing too is this idea of challenging purchase orders. Yeah, if a PO is like massive and you're gonna have a huge deduction in the future, better that you get that PO reduced to reduce that deduction. And then you could also, the reason I say it's preventable, you could also consider not reducing the price, but it's preventable also in the sense is that you can work with the distributor to reduce the amount of product in the DC when that price change takes effect. Short shipped PO. This is important. If you don't ship a distributor PO in full or you delay a pickup, you will be charged fees. Unless you are able to talk to your buyer, have a relationship with your buyer, and have them adjust that PO on their own. So to this end, I highly recommend you make friends with your buyers. Their names, often their phone numbers and email addresses are on the POs that are coming into you. And they tend to be pretty reasonable people if you build that relationship. It doesn't always work, but it's a kind of a hack that I recommend. It's a lot of brands will just ship what they can. They already feel guilty or maybe even ashamed. They can't fulfill the PO. They're a small company. They're worried about the big company being mad. I encourage you not to be in that space, to just say, hey, I can't get it done. Can you help me, buyer, by adjusting that PO? So packaging, temperature, and UPC changes. This is where I was talking about at the beginning, where I have a client and a company I've invested in where we really got whacked during a change in this case, it was packaging and temperature. And what happens when you change like a UPC code, for example, in this example, is that the remaining product in the distribution center, when you have the new product come in with the new UPC code, the idea there is that you take back all that old product or they'll destroy it. And there's reverse logistics and there's charges from the distributor for that. So just like the previous example, your goal when this is happening to you, if it does happen to you, is to reduce the amount of inventory in those DCs to the minimum, maybe even having some minor shorts at the point where you're doing that switch over to minimize the amount of reverse logistics that you would have to pay. And yeah, so the other problem too with this is there's in the case of this client, the Unify actually in some DCs did run out, and others they didn't, and they had crazy amounts of excess inventory. And in some cases where they had run out of the old inventory, they didn't turn on the new UPC for 3 weeks. So there was missed sales, things fell off shelf and became a disaster. So number one is any way you could avoid doing something like this, like doing a packaging temperature UPC change for your product, that makes this preventable. That would be fantastic. If you have to do it, you need to manage your supply chain extremely close, especially the inventory levels. So that, and also the other part of that too, so that you also are monitoring it close enough where you realize when you run out of stock of the old UPC or the old packaging, and then you can really push on the distributor to turn on the new UPC. I don't assume it's going to automatically happen. I've seen too many cases where it doesn't. Spoilage. So distributors require at least 70% shelf life at the point of delivery. So this is one where, it could make sense to tell the distributor you have a lower shelf or a less of a shelf life than you really do. The benefit there is that actually gives you more time to sell your product. I don't, not your lawyer, but I talked to a lawyer about that because you're signing a contract to that point. But um, this can really hurt especially an emerging brand where it's really hard to ascertain what velocity is. If you produce too much, you hit that 70% shelf life barrier, and then you're in trouble. Um, Distributors will pull products from inventory when it becomes too close to coding out. So fresh products can get much closer, but a shelf-stable product, in some cases, could be pulled from stock a month or 2 months before they hit code life, depending on what category it is. So how to prevent spoilage, number one is rationalize all POs coming in. Like look at them and look at what's in those DCs and look at recent demand and does it make sense? If they're over ordering, and it's easy for us to say, hey, it's the distributor's fault, but according to the contract you signed, it's not. You will have to pay the cost if that product goes out of code. It's incumbent on you as the brand to be watching that. The other thing too, and I've had this happen multiple times with brands where they're like, instead of putting on the code life we tested for, I'm putting on a lower code life. Well, you can see where that could lead to more spoilage, right? So maybe there's somewhere in between. The goal would be to have the maximum amount of product code life on the product, um, while also taking into account that supply chains aren't perfect and product may get warm, and you want to reduce the amount of product getting to a consumer spoiled. But just be very mindful about that because if you go too short, you can really get burned with spoilage. And again, even if the distributor bought more than they should have, quote unquote, should have, you're still responsible for that. And then again, monitoring stock at HTC. Always be monitoring. Look for risks of spoilage before you get a notification from the distributor. At that point, it's often too late to do anything. Okay, erroneous deductions. So keeping track of your commitments, everything you need to capture, everything your sales team has committed to. You need to know what that is. And ideally, your sales team is giving you an estimate of, of how much they expect that promotion to cost. That's that estimate point right here. Estimate the total cost of each commitment. So as deductions are coming through, it's easier to track if you said, oh yeah, we committed to doing this deal at Fresh Market. We thought it'd be $30,000. It came back 31,500. That's the normal reason. Fantastic. But you also do this because you want to be able to accrue these costs into your financials. I've had way too many clients who January is like new year, new you. They have a fantastic month. They think they've made hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then all the deductions from the MCBs and other allowances they did in January come and hit you in February. It's really important that you're tracking this. And before we get to the end of this section, I'll show you a spreadsheet that we use on our deduction management team to help our clients keep track of this. So as a deduction arrives, this is self-explanatory, but you wouldn't believe how many brands don't do it, right? But it's deductions arrive, review against the contract you sign with the distributor, and then against the promo tracker where you're keeping track of everything you committed to, determine the validity, and then if it's valid, you code it to your GL and you go, and if not, you fight that deduction. Let's keep on going. Here's a client of ours where we had 2,409 deductions, amounting to $1.6 million. We disputed 122 of those, representing $200,000, so over 10%. We won 67 of those, claiming back $186,000. So there's real money. I was on a phone with a client yesterday who had $100,000 recovered in the last couple of months. I mean, it's you're leaving money on the table if you're not watching this. I want to be clear. I don't think the large distributors are trying to steal from you. The systems are just so complex and convoluted that it's very easy for mistakes to happen. And our duty as a brand is to make sure that we're on that. And what if you dispute, they don't pay back? Follow up, reach out to your category manager with the distributor. This one here, you want to use carefully, but we've gotten really good at how to write an email to the distributor that pretty much just says in the subject line, on hold, will notify, fill in the blank, key retailer. Sprouts, Whole Foods, Fresh Time, Fresh Market, right? And then that usually gets the attention. And both Unify and KeHE have escalation teams where if like something's going ballistic in this space, they will escalate and they can resolve things extremely quickly. So that on hold tool is something that is available. I'd only use it if you really have been wronged and never give up would be what we say. So I'm going to get out of this for a second and just go into another just an example here. This is a spreadsheet that we use with our deduction management team, and we do these bespoke for every client. And in this case, we're actually matching up all the different possible deductions, which looks like there's 59 possible deductions. And then we code them into the GL and we match them up. Let's see here. This is where this is a master spreadsheet of all the commitments. So here we go, commitments, and you can see here we're also talking about the trade spend. We're estimating, this is a small brand, but we're estimating for them what each one of these grocery promotions will add up to. And so whether it's this system or some other system, that you need to have a system to keep track of this. And we'll go back here and I'll share this again. Present and presenting. So the last area I'm going to get into is let's see here, OIs. So I'm going to go briefly through this. In terms of deductions, the main way you can get burned is an overpool deduction. Let's say at the beginning of an off invoice period, there's 3,000 cases in the distributor that they paid the normal price for. And then you ship in 7,000 cases at 15% off for inventory purchase with an OI discount. And then, but what happens though is they end up selling 10,000. They sold the 3,000 that was already there that had no allowance. They sold the 7,000 that you shipped in with an allowance, and you're going to get a deduction for those 3,000 cases that were the excess overpull. It's called an overpull deduction. They are common, and so it's the opposite of bridge buying, which is where they buy too much. So just be prepared for that. It's not no real way to prevent it, and it's just something that can come grab you without you being aware of it. Last area here is bridge buying, and so as you think about OIs, if you have a long code life product, the distributor might buy 3 months of a product. Let's say at a 15% OI, the retailers get 15% off that first month, but that second month they don't get it anymore. But the distributor is still selling out of that stock that they had the 15% discount on. And the third month, you're sad. You haven't gotten an order. You can't keep your people that busy anymore making product. And you didn't purchase from your distributor in 2 months. And then what I've seen this happen way too often is this right here. 3 months have passed. The distributor places an order, and now you did a second OI. And so what could happen here is a distributor could buy only on OIs the entire time. So our philosophy in OIs is no more than one OI per year, unless you have shelf life of less than 6 months, then you can get away with it. And I want to remind you that OIs do not guarantee that the retailers will reflect the deal at shelf unless promo forms are submitted to each retailer and they're accepted. OIs are, even when I worked at a retailer, we would choose the OIs we wanted to mark down product at shelf, and then we would scoop the other ones into our margin. So there's, you have distributors scooping margin on you, you have retailers scooping margin on you. It can be difficult. So because of time, we'll skip that one and we will move on to questions and answers, and excited to hear any questions that are out there. Back to you, Wade.
All right, Luke, I'm going to start. We have some in the chat, but I'm going to start with those that were sent in advance. The first one was, what best practices should businesses implement to minimize the occurrence of unauthorized deductions? And how can businesses develop a successful strategy to recover funds from invalid deductions?
okay, so hopefully that first question I've answered, right? I kind of went through a number of the deductions and how to prevent them. Um, and in terms of like what is that kind of policy procedure in order to handle it, I think I went through that as well. And that was the Google sheet I just shared in terms of capturing everything you're committing to. And so every deduction coming in is literally reviewed relative to the contract. Is it a 2% deduction for, you know, for early payment, or is it a deal you gave to a retailer? Well, okay, I got that. And then it also helps you to squeeze out the ones that you did not commit to, because if it doesn't fit into a contract, it doesn't fit into what you captured, in terms of all the promotions you agreed to with your retailers and other costs with retailers and distributors, then it's by definition erroneous. And then ideally you have someone on your team who literally, either you hire someone like us, right? Like we could do that on your behalf, to just own it and fight back and be incessant and never give up, following up with those distributors. And again, if they don't pay you back and you're not moving the needle and you're sure you're owed it, then I would definitely go on to use the on hold email approach to get paid.
Great. And I think you answered this. I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud and talk through just in case there's something here that we haven't touched on. But again, two questions here. What strategies can companies implement to effectively manage and overcome distributor deductions, turning potential losses into victories? And what best practices can organizations adopt to transform their approach to distributors deductions and improve their overall profitability? I think you
I
touched on
think we
those, Luke.
covered that.
Anything?
Yep.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
feel good about that. There's a specific question that this person has. Feel free to ask it during the next 20 minutes.
Sure. And then going into the chat from Lori V, she goes back to saying,
Lori,
when you
hi.
talk about with regards to taking pictures and things like that, she's saying that we use the signed BOL. And the follow up to that from Kristen, she says delivered. We've been hit with ship not received and have had to proof of delivery statements from UPS. So I don't know. Going back to that signed BOL, Luke, I know you touched on that, but anything else to expand there?
No, from our team, the leader of that team, I've asked her recently, like, is that still working? And she said, I believe she said every time. So as long as we have the pictures, products on the pallet, products on the truck, ideally the driver picking it up. It's like it becomes kind of irrefutable at that point. It's like there's a cognitive dissonance required by the distributor to still get that money from you. Did I get that right, Wade?
Yeah, well, and I think the point is that the signed BOL itself is probably not
No,
going to be sufficient enough to win that fight, right?
in this case, right? Because you signed a contract that allows them not to have the BOL be the controlling document, right? So
Okay, and
go ahead.
go ahead.
So I guess what I was going to say is technically then they don't even have like our system that we use taking photos, like they could actually still say no to that, right? Because they said we don't have it, and that's good enough. But I think there's also a sense of fairness that we appeal to, that they're fighting back on that and say this just isn't right, and then we're escalating it to the supervisor, and then we're doing. If we have to, we will get the retailer involved if the retailer is big enough, right? I wouldn't do it for a two-store chain. But hey, if it's Sprouts and this product's for them and I'm being mistreated this way, I would definitely bring it up
Yeah, and I
and
think
move it up the chain.
there's a different question on a different topic, but I want to keep on this because we got a couple follow-ups here. One from Taylor. She says, even showing photos, we're getting denied. What do we do from there, along with
Escalate,
the signed BOL from their accounts payable?
escalate. Ask for the supervisor.
And Lori saying she doesn't think her co-packer would take photos.
I know, and that's a hard one. So if you had to pay them a little, here I'd say this: the biggest deductions I see are these. This is the lion's share of the terms of like dollar size of deductions. So if I had to pay my co-manufacturer $5 a photo, I would pay that. If the orders are bigger than, $1,000, right? I think it'd be worth it, because this happens way too often where a product just doesn't. I don't think the distributor's trying to steal from you, but you get into a loading dock of a distributor, stuff is just going everywhere. And so, things can be easy, pallets can be lost. And so it's, the more you can do to substantiate that. And I just would not let go. I would not let go. If the person tells you no, I go to the supervisor. And if they still say no, continue to push. And then if not, I'm doing it on hold. And I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to notify the retailer about it if I need to. The goal isn't to do that. The goal is to resolve it internally with the distributor, but I will not stop because that it's just wrong, right? And,
Right.
and there's a definitely appealing to the sense of fairness of any human being on this one.
Right. Well, that's a good segue into Kristen's next question. She says she'd like some help with a short ship, please. They deliver cases of 12. Sometimes Kehi says the case only has 10. We think it was not short shipped and they don't pay us for the full 12. What happens to the 10 they did receive? And is there any way to prove we did send the full 12?
Okay, so it's actually literally in the case, I shipped 12, and then when they get there, he only counts 10 in the case.
That's the way I'm interpreting it. Yes.
That's crazy. That's a wild one. Hey, Kristen, I see you responding yes. Uh, okay, I I guess what you'd have to do in that case is literally open the cases you're shipping and take pictures and just validate it. I mean, I've never heard of that happening before. And Chris, I'd be happy to talk to you on the side on that one. Let's see if we can figure that one out because that one sounds unique.
Good. And this one's probably $1 million question, and we'll try and keep it in the guardrails here, Luke. But why is this all falling on our manufacturers and not retailers?
I love it. I love it because it can. Um, ah, yeah, I think I used to be really frustrated about this when I sold my company to Kehi, and I kind of understood now. Okay, like, well, this is how the market works, and I was just like, wow, this isn't right. And you can imagine like all the Monterey, my old distribution company brands coming into the Kehi world. There was so much frustration. And then the reality is this is market, right? And I think that's all I can say is like I had to sell my distribution company because of market. I couldn't compete because I wasn't cost shifting. That became market. So I think it's the why is it is what it is because it is the market. And because they can be pushed on you, it is. And it's just part of the price we pay for the extreme pleasure of being part of this industry, right, Wade?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
so markets can change, right? And I just as I mentioned, I think at the beginning here, like there was a national newspaper article being written about this, and I think as more information gets disseminated out to the world about what's happening here, the market can change. There an idea I have too, not for the sense of like victims trying to fight against the aggressor, but more of like trying to help distributors on how we can partner together. I'd love to put together a group of brands from all sizes that becomes representative of our industry to talk to retailers, talk to distributors. I think that's where I'd like to go next because I think what I see is a lot of complaining and a lot of stress and a lot of people going out of business over all this and we need to and I think we can complain about it, but we need to really lead positive change. We're not trying to like do a strike, right? We can't do that. It doesn't benefit anybody. Yeah, right, Lori. You're the innovators. We need to figure out a way to do this better.
Yeah, it's almost like a share group mentality where
Yeah.
and then but then arming that share group with the ability to push and innovate change as Lori said there. So and I think something just real quick because I know we still have plenty of time for questions, so please continue to put them in the chat. I just want to mention because I didn't do this at the beginning, but as we've talked about and Luke mentioned, when we were going over our services, Vdriven does offer deduction management services. They're very affordable, but because you're attending this webinar masterclass right now, we're going to offer 10% off for the first 3 months of those services if you use the code deduction ninjas. And Luke, I know you get a kick out of that because we've got this team that is fighting deductions for so many of the brands we work with. You want to talk a little bit about that deduction ninja mentality before we go to the next question?
Yeah, so the deduction ninja, so Rachel's the leader of our department, and the mentality is whenever I talk to her, she always knows all the statistics, how much money she's gotten back this year, and how many deductions she's challenged, and she's just like such. It's a game of numbers, and she challenges everything that she possibly can, and that's why I think I shared those numbers earlier. Like we're challenging more than we actually get back, right? And so wherever we think there's even a little opportunity of getting that money back, she's challenging it, and she's just voracious about winning, and she celebrates every win and sends emails out to our leadership team when she gets a big win. So just really, really love that, and love the energy around helping smaller brands. And I want to be clear, like you don't have to have a company like ours, right? You can fight back. There's disadvantages from using a company that this is all like we have a team, this is all they do every day, right? And
Right.
we get better and better at it over time.
Well, and I know as every minute that goes by, the statistics she provides are outdated because she's constantly recovering more money. And if I'm not mistaken, the total to date since inception of that department is nearing $3 million recovered, correct?
Hmm.
Which
Yeah,
is
it's been a
just
lot this year.
staggering. It's just staggering. So, okay, back to the questions. We've got again, if you want to, if you're interested, reach out, use the code Deduction Ninjas. You'll save some money above and beyond the already affordable price. Enough of that sales pitch. We got a question from Dan. He says, "Hey Luke, great to be here. Is there a statute of limitations on post-audit deductions?"
Okay, post-audit deductions, statute of limitations. You know what? I'll have to go back and read for sure. And I'm wondering, let's see. I don't see if I have Rachel here. In my experience, it's been 2 years, is what I've seen. I'm not saying that's the limit, but that's what I've seen in my experience.
Okay,
But
good.
the yeah, but the contract actually, and I don't have it up in my mind, but you might want to just review the contract to see if there actually is something stated there of how many years. And I think Wade, and I think Alexandra, you're here. If you want to make a note of that, we'll go back and look at the standard PMPs from KE and Unify and see, but that is, and then we'll share that back with the group.
Good. We have a question from Noah. Noah, thanks for joining us. What kind of margin should
Mm.
manufacturers add to account for all these additional costs? And I think that goes back to, the profitability aspect from the beginning and having the right price
Yeah,
prior to getting too far along down the path, right?
yeah, I agreed. So what I what I use as a number, I think if you were like doing everything perfectly to avoid every possible deduction that the distributor could do, the best you could ever do is 5.5% for them on the buy side. And then I think good would be 7.5, and anything over 7.5 is like, okay, you can probably manage that better. So 7.5% um, is a fair number, but your experience may be different. Let's say you have a product code life it's only 60 days, then you're probably going to have a much higher deduction rate because a product just, it takes potentially 28 days if this FOB your doc to get to actually to a distribution center, and then it gets pulled before it goes out of code. So it's going to vary based on your product and your code life. But it's something that I think if managed well should be about 7.5%.
Great. Great. That's helpful. And I think too that goes back to that's the portion you're adding on, but hopefully your number to begin with is strong enough, right? And that's a whole
Yeah.
different topic,
And
right?
I'll just share quickly like the rules of thumb I use would be 45% product margin at a minimum in order to be at least like break even. You're treading water, and 55% is like I go, okay, you're good. Especially as an emerging brand. If you're at 55% gross margin, you're going to improve that over time. You're in a decent place
Yeah, and
to
I
be able to
think that's
cover all
something
that.
I know I speak to all the time is that understanding that math up front is going to save you a lot of headaches down the road. So we have a comment from Fred saying that he's seeing up close to 4 years at different distributors as well as retailers. So we're checking on what we see actually in those contracts that are out there, or just to get a little bit of clarity. But
Thank
definitely
you,
want to
Fred.
check that part on your end as well.
Mhm.
Lori says she just did a price increase to cover these shenanigans. So but it'll
Well,
probably take 90
and I
days to
think
be implemented, right?
yeah, and I think that's going back. This subject line we're on right now is an important one, and it's we actually are doing a pitch slam at Sprouts. I think in 2 weeks, and we met with a lot of emerging brands yesterday, and we just were really upfront with them. Like you need to build in 7.5% into your model because most emerging brands don't, and then they get whacked, and they're like, "What happened?" And then that's where kind of the feeling of being a victim is, right? Is like I didn't know about this, and now I'm being hit, but now all of you, all 49 of you, do today.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. Again, we have a few more minutes left for questions. If there's any questions you'd like to add in the chat, please do so. We have few more minutes to answer anything that you might have on the topic that we've covered today. Um, what else? Anything else that you have, Luke?
Let's see here. 7.5% over the 15% OI. Yes, I see Taylor's question come up. Uh, I think there's maybe one last area to get into that. Let me see if I have it handy. Let's see. Actually, maybe it not even be in here today. But I think a lot of people ask me the difference between doing an MCB versus an OI. And let me just bring that up since we have a few minutes as a group. So I think this is valuable. Have any more questions there, Wade? If not, I'm just going to hit this real quick.
Not yet. I think this is good to cover. Again, I'm going to put the link up to reach out to us if you'd like to schedule time to chat with us and our
Okay.
services. The link's in the chat.
Okay. So I don't like OIs, right? OIs are difficult because you're giving the distributor 15% off invoice and they can buy 6 months of product and scoop for all the other months except for the 1 month that it's on promo, right? Called the scooping here. Retailers can also scoop by buying an extra product from the distributor or just not even reflecting the deal off shelf. They just take the 15% for themselves. And of course, consumers get a benefit. So ideally, you're driving trial. MCBs can suck as well, right? I'm not saying that you should never do these things, but it's hard because in this case, the distributor doesn't get to scoop necessarily, but in terms of how the allowance is done, it's done at the highest list price, very similar to the free fill situation. And so, that's nice about it is you can target the MCBs to specific retailers, ideally ones who you've submitted promo forms to and who have agreed to run the promo. Because if you think about it, the OI is like extremely broad. Everybody gets it, whether they actually mark it down or not. An MCB done right is only going to be going to the retailers who actually mark it down and only during that month period. So I think that if I had to, in general, I would choose the MCB over the OI, even though it's billed back at a higher price, because at least I'm driving trial with my consumer. And then the other example would be a 15% scan back. Whenever I can do scan backs, that's what I do. There's no buy-in possibility for the distributor or the retailer. In a true scan back situation, you're only being scanned back for the product that scans through the register at the allowance that you gave. And that's usually the best way to go. And in terms of like managing your profitability, that's just a little thought there for everybody.
And I'll just expand on that real quick as well because I didn't really go too far into my background. I think most people know what my background is, but I prior to joining Luke and the Vdriven team, I spent the last 20 years in leadership positions on the retailer side. And I can tell you those bridge buys that Luke talked about on the retailer side as well as the distribution side, they absolutely happen. In fact, I can tell you firsthand, I was the person responsible at more than one retailers during my journey that I was the person responsible for bridge buying, and I was not to toot my own horn, but I was pretty good at it. So it's definitely a way to pad margin for the retailers. Lori asked or stated, my contract with Unify was done 10 years ago. Is it legal? They can start charging me now.
So you need to ask an attorney what's legal or not. I can tell you what I've heard. The responses from the distributors is that there's actually a part in their agreement that says they can make additional changes in the future. So I don't know about the 10-year-old, but I call PMP if that allowed that. But you'll want to read that agreement. Ideally, have your attorney review it. But the way that at least more recent brands, as I understand it, is Unify and KeHE can do whatever they want for the most part, whenever they want, based on the agreements you sign. That's extreme, but for the most part, they can do that with new fees and things. For example, SSA with Unify, again, I think it's in general a positive idea for emerging brands. Isn't optional, right? It's like you have to do this, and that's the way that the contract's set up. And again, this is market, right? This is the market as it is today.
Right. And I know we're getting real tight on time, but I put two additional links in the chat. The first one is a link to Luke's podcast that he mentioned earlier. It's called the Reconnected Podcast and talks a lot about supply chain and the topics he mentioned earlier. And then I also put a link to the podcast I do every week live on LinkedIn on Fridays called CPG Vibes.
Mm,
That's there
that's a
as
good one.
well. And we have different topics every week where Luke kind of focuses a lot on the supply chain. We talk about many different things every week. And something you could do that would help both Luke and myself out is if you take 2 seconds, click those links and give us 5 stars. That would be awesome. It helps our algorithms and helps us show up better. So, any other questions? We got a couple minutes left. Real quick, I want to make sure we didn't leave anything out or any last points from your end, Luke, that you'd like to touch on.
Nope, I think that was it. I'm grateful everyone that showed up today. This is a good sized group, and any questions you have, feel free to send them. I'm happy to answer them. I have a big heart for this, and would love to help where I can.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that, we do this because it is a labor of love, and we want to educate and we want to help. And I think Luke, under your leadership, it's the way we're running the organization is to try and be community oriented as best we can to help not only our clients but the greater community as well. So we appreciate everyone joining us. And watch your emails for the next masterclass. I'm sure it'll be coming up. We haven't figured out just yet when that date will be. Probably sometime next month or early December. But watch your emails, and we appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tess.